Thank you.
Okay, so we will call the regular meeting of the Trinity County Planning Commission on January 11th, 2024 to order at 6 o'clock. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, we'll invite public comment. During the public comment period, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any matter not listed on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Do we have any public comment in the room? Any public comment on Zoom? Okay. Thank you. At this time, then, we'll close public comment. Oh, I'm sorry, public comment in the room.
6:02, let's get our public comment going. Is this for all items?
It's for things that aren't on the agenda.
Things that aren't on the agenda. When can I speak on an agenda item?
It should be shortly.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Okay, so we'll close public comment then and move on to the regular calendar. Item 1, minutes. To approve the minutes of the November 16th, 2023 and December 14th, 2023 meetings. Do we have any public comment on the minutes? Do you have any corrections from commissioners? Well, I want to thank the staff for adding the additional language to the November 16th meeting as far as what our action was. Thank you. And so at this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve minutes for those 2 dates.
I was absent at the
Correct, you're right. So we'll take them separately. Thank you. Good point. So then we'll discuss the minutes of November 16th, 2023. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion that we approve those minutes. Second it.
Motion by Commissioner Heaton, second by Commissioner Ellis. All those in favor of approving the minutes of November 16th, 2023, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. And then we'll move to the minutes of December 14th, 2023. A motion to approve, please.
I'll make that motion.
A motion by Commissioner Heaton, second by
Second.
Commissioner Ellis. All those in favor of approving the minutes for December 14th, 2023, please say aye.
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 I'll abstain because I wasn't here. Sorry.
Extension by Commissioner Barrett. Thank you. That closes agenda item 1. We're going to move on to agenda item 2. discussion study session to review and provide recommendations to the Board of Supervisors on how to improve the CCV resolution. Board of Supervisors Resolution 2023-071, including supporting comments. So I'll turn this over to staff initially.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners, Drew Plavani, Cannabis Division Director. Before you this evening, we have project number, which we've given DEV 2401, which essentially the Board of Supervisors directed staff to schedule a discussion/study session for the Planning Commission to review and provide recommendations to the board on how to improve the CCV resolution, including supporting comments. I'll go into a little bit of project background and how we arrived at this agenda item. And then I guess, I'll be here for any clarifying or technical questions you may have throughout the evening. So in 2020, Ordinance 315-849 was adopted to incorporate mitigations of the Certified Environmental Impact Report, and also to include Section 1743050, which is limitation on location to cultivate cannabis. Section A8 of 050 requires that sites within the Trinity County Commercial Cannabis Program for small specialty and specialty cottage license types shall not be allowed within 350 feet of a legal residential structure on any adjoining parcel. But it allows for the ability to apply for a variance from this provision, which is commonly known as a CCV, a commercial cultivation variance. And so from 2016 until early 22, staff had interpreted the word cultivation to mean canopy as it related to verifying that setback requirement between cultivation and related elements to adjacent residences. In early 22, staff, I guess, probably reread the definition of cultivation, and from that, a change in the interpretation and the practice of how that setback was measured occurred. In April, we brought an item before the Planning Commission to essentially try to change the use of the terms, or to clarify the use of the terms cultivation versus canopy as it relates to this 350-foot residential setback requirement. The Planning Commission, I believe, voted not in favor of that item, which was presented to them. And following that, excuse me, at the direction of the Cannabis Ordinance Ad Hoc, staff brought to the Board of Supervisors a resolution, which is Resolution 2023-071, which is titled "A Resolution of the Board of Supervisors of the County of Trinity allowing the streamlined approval of cannabis licenses that require CCVs for the calendar year 2023." And so, as part of the staff report before you this evening, there are two attachments. Attachment 1 is the approved, adopted version of Resolution 2023-071, and attachment 2 is SHN, who are planning land use consultants for the County of Trinity, their recommended changes or suggested changes to the resolution, just for your consideration on this matter. In December, recognizing that the original intent of Resolution 2023-071 was to allow for this streamlined approval, essentially waiving the requirement for renewal CCVs to be processed as director's use permits, and to also address the change of interpretation that had happened in 2022, which created essentially new CCVs on previously licensed sites because of the change of interpretation. The intent was that, ordinance updates, originally the plan was to have the comprehensive ordinance updates done by the end of 2023. Recognizing that that had not been accomplished, we agendized for the Board of Supervisors an extension to the resolution, which we took to the board. And then the outcome of that board item was to bring this schedule and bring this discussion/study session for you all this evening, for you to provide recommendations on how to improve the CCV resolution along with your supporting comments. I think that's probably sufficient background, but if you have any specific technical questions right now, I'm happy to answer them. Or obviously we can get into the discussion of sort of the criteria that were established in that resolution and your thoughts and questions, concerns, and hopefully get a series of comments that we can bring back to the board for their consideration.
Okay, do we have any technical or clarifying questions for staff?
I do. So the cultivation and canopy change things for existing licenses as well as future licenses, correct?
Yes, so essentially the practice and I would say the interpretation of staff prior to early 22 was that the setback requirement was measured from canopy, which is defined solely as the mature canopy. However, that code section says cultivation, which has a more expansive definition beyond just mature canopy. So it also captures other cultivation related elements such as processing buildings and things like that. So there were a number of sites that as a result of that change of interpretation, they were previously, established, configured, licensed, approved. But as a result of that change of interpretation, they would now be required to obtain an initial CCV for their current historical previously approved configuration.
And that could require them to move a structure or change where they do something on their property. Is that correct?
Yes, I guess it could.
Or
The
or
outcome
get a
of-
variance for the 350-foot setback?
Correct.
That would be difficult.
And in many cases, a significant cost to that applicant for, something that they already received a building permit for and finalized a shop building or something like that. Yep.
Okay. Any more questions, Commissioner Ellis?
I think the 350-foot thing is always going to be difficult. The other part of that question that I have is what happens to the person that has the parcel next to an approved grow that hasn't built, but now that has a desire to build. And the only place they can build is within that 350-foot setback. How does that affect the grow that is existing and and their building of the building? And how is it made fair?
I'm assuming that you're referring to a residential structure on an adjacent parcel, not an outbuilding, but
Yes.
specifically a residence. My take on that would be that as code is currently constructed, that would create the requirement for a CCV hearing as a result of no longer meeting that 350-foot setback requirement. Does that answer the question, or is there
I
more?
think it does. I think what my concern is how is that fair to either party? How does that work? To have a setback, does the person that has owns the property that now wants to build supersede the property that already has the operation going, or vice versa? or not at all?
I don't know that it necessarily dictates the outcome of that CCV hearing, but it certainly does create the requirement for a CCV as a result of no longer meeting the residential setback requirement as it relates to a new structure on an adjacent parcel to a previously existing cultivation site. Without getting too deep into that topic, I think that that's one of the reasons that we have been considering updates to this code section, specifically 1743050, where the requirement for this residential setback is codified. And so I think that my guess would be that here in the not too distant future, we will have more specific discussion about potential updates to that code section and specifically address your concerns or, you know, how to work through that dynamic and have that clearly captured in code.
Thank you.
Commissioners, other questions? I have a few. So one of the things that I think SHN in their proposal would do is delete what you're currently doing, which is sending out the consent application notices. And so if someone, I mean, does someone get any notice at all now? I mean, is there any notice that someone, you know, is renewing this variance or something? You know, how does that work?
So I guess I didn't address that specifically, but one of the outcomes of Resolution 2023-071 was that we included a few additional requirements to the license approval process. One of those related to their Appendix C environmental document was the inclusion of attenuation plans to basically address what staff considered to be the three primary concerns from adjacent residences or adjacent property owners: noise, light, and odor. And so as a result of the resolution, anyone who who did not meet the setback requirement that had previously been issued a planning commission approved CCV or any of the other associated criteria that qualified under the resolution, they were required to include those additional attenuation plans into their Appendix C document. And then in terms of the neighbor notification process, we included the consent opposition letter, which alerted the adjacent property owners to the fact that the resolution had been applied to the adjacent property that is a cultivation site, and that gave them the opportunity, per the way code is constructed or per the way the resolution was constructed, to submit their opposition or write in their opposition on that form letter. And the resolution says that if qualified opposition was received, then that project would need to come to the Planning Commission for a CCV hearing, whether it was for a site that had previously had received an approved initial variance, or for any of the other sites that were covered by the resolution.
And how would that neighbor notification change if that consent opposition letter is not sent out? I mean, do they still get any notification?
So it's a little bit outside of, I think, you know, from my perspective anyways, outside of the current resolution, but as a proposed addition or, you know, modification to the current resolution, what's been proposed is essentially that we would move this process to something that is more consistent with the director's use permit process. And so going forward, if we were to incorporate SHN suggested edits to the resolution, I think there could be one of two potential outcomes, maybe more, but essentially we would move towards the DUP noticing process. So essentially the neighbors, instead of receiving a consent opposition form letter, would receive a letter to the effect that we have, the county has received an application for a director's use permit if we went in that direction, that would trigger a comment period for the adjacent property owners to submit comments to that, essentially that project or that application, which then could be included into the conditions of approval. And if the planning director chose or felt that there was sufficient evidence of concern that he or she felt that wasn't going to be able to be adequately addressed through the inclusion of additional conditions of approval, that DUP could be elevated to a CUP, and then it would come before you all as a CUP hearing. And then there would be a second set of neighbor notices that went out, essentially saying the director has approved a director's use permit, and then that would trigger the ability for the director's decision to be appealed to the planning commission.
So in attachment 2, where does it say director's use permit?
It doesn't specifically say director's use permit, and this is sort of a part of the conversation that I think, as I said to some of the earlier questions, I think that this will come back before you potentially as updates to Chapter 1743, subsection 050. So it doesn't specifically address converting it to a DUP, but that is very much part of the concept that they proposed in their comments and suggested edits to the resolution. One of the other things that in discussion with SHN and with Retta Vanderplu, who is Prentice Long's land use and planning attorney, that essentially rather than utilizing the consent opposition form, that we should go forward with the standard process, which is the ability to appeal the director's decision to the planning commission. And so I hope that helps to answer your question.
Yeah, I appreciate all that information. I'm still a little fuzzy though on how neighbors are initially notified. So someone comes in for their license, that renewal, and you look at it and say, well, normally they would have had to get a variance, but in this case, because of the criteria in the resolution, they don't need a variance. And so do you notify the neighbors then that they're not going to have to obtain a variance because of the resolution?
Yes, so we notify the neighbors that as a result of resolution 2023-071, this project has the ability for them to fill out the consent opposition form.
But you're going to potentially take that consent opposition form away. So if you take that form away, what kind of notification does a neighbor get?
If we were to convert that to the director's use permit, then we would send out the notification that says the county has received an application for a, the concept that we've talked about in the first draft of the ordinances is referred to as an administrative buffer reduction. And so if that were to be established in code, then the adjacent property owners would receive a neighbor notification that says, The county has received an application for director's use permit for an administrative buffer reduction, and it would clearly call out the 10 days that they have to submit comments, and that it would also clearly call out the timeline for when the director would be able to take action in terms of approving that DUP, and then also let them know that there would be the 10-day appeal period following the director's approval of that director's use permit. And so they would actually receive 2 notifications versus the one. They'd receive the notification that we'd received an application for that director's use permit, and then they would receive notification that the director had approved that director's use permit, which would afford them the ability to appeal under 1730E.
So currently, if someone wanted to appeal, then it would come to us as a CC variance hearing.
If currently, as this resolution that is in place is constructed, they wouldn't be appealing per se. They would be posing formal opposition, and then that would, per the resolution, bring that project before you all for you to have a hearing to make a decision about.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out how the neighbors find out, and if they do find out, how it comes back to us if they object. Okay. And the notification period for a director's use permit, how long do they have before they, have to provide some sort of comment or feedback?
I believe that it's 10 days.
So the same as
10
the
days.
consent opposition form? Okay.
Is that calendar days or is that week, work days? What?
I believe it's business days.
Business days,
So
okay.
if typically at least, yep.
Okay.
So if there's a holiday, then we don't count that day. We don't count weekends. Yep.
Because I have had, well, that's not a question. Okay, so technical clarifying questions. So I'm still not sure. I guess is legal counsel online?
I do have a question whenever you're finished.
No. Well, while they're looking, Commissioner Barrett, you have a question?
If we did move to a DUP, is that something that would have to be renewed annually?
I think that would be at the discretion of the board if they were, and for you all to give your input on as when we brought that item before you, and then following that to the board for them to adopt that by resolution into ordinance.
So right now you send out the consent opposition form every year though? Every year that right, this is just a short-term fix. So
Right. So from I believe it was May 16th through today, any CCV renewal or any project that meets the criteria would receive a consent opposition letter in the mail. One of the reasons that I brought the extension to the board was to, address the fact that we are now in 22, we were approaching 2024 and we hadn't completed ordinance updates. And so, just needing to continue to have some ability to address this situation without.
So if we fix this, then they potentially wouldn't need a director's use permit or the consent opposition letter for this kind of issue. Am I understanding that right?
Right. And to Commissioner Barrett's question, I think it remains to be seen whether or not this director's use permit would be renewed annually or would be, a permanent entitlement of sorts.
Which I think would be the way to go. I think an annual renewal would be a nightmare for all parties involved. I agree. So, yeah.
Is it an annual renewal right now for a CCV though?
Yeah.
So just to clarify that part of the process, code basically in 1743-050 sets it up that for an initial CCV or variance to this cultivation setback requirement, The initial comes to the planning commission, and then subsequent years are to be renewed as a director's use permit. And one of the reasons that in the criteria of the resolution, it was decided that the requirement for the renewal DUP also be waived is that, we were short-staffed in terms of planning capacity. And our planner at that point felt that it wasn't going to be feasible to accomplish that many additional director's use permits along with the pretty significant backlog of CUPs and DUP projects that have been waiting for some time now, several years, to be processed.
Okay, so any legal counsel online? No? Because my question was going to be, I'm still not sure how you change an ordinance by resolution versus, going through the ordinance amendment procedure. If it's just, what was originally presented to us is it was a minor text amendment, which we didn't agree with. And now it seems to have gone way beyond the minor text agreement. So I'm just not sure how you change an ordinance with a resolution. I thought you'd have to go through the resolution, ordinance amendment procedure.
And I'm not entirely certain, but my take on it, given some of the other resolutions that I've looked at, from the Board of Supervisors, is that oftentimes when there is an ordinance that is being passed, they pass the ordinance by resolution. And so there's a resolution that is part of the ordinance approval process, if that helps to clarify a little bit.
Okay. So one of the things I'm curious about, so how long are we really envisioning that this would take? I mean, what I've heard and what was proposed was either this kind of waiver of this procedure would be until the ordinance is updated or through the end of 2024.
And so at the December 19th board meeting, I guess the short-term compromise, we could call it, that was reached was that the resolution was extended through February of 2024. And so this could be extended through the remainder of 2024. You all could certainly request that the board entertain updates to 1743-050 and direct staff to bring you all updates to that code section to modify the process and move it towards the administrative buffer reduction concept and director's use permit that we proposed in the first draft of ordinance updates. So if that were to be the case, we could have that concept back to you next month for you all to weigh in on those changes to 1743-050 and capture this change from CCVs to an administrative buffer reduction process.
I think that sounds agreeable. We know the changes as they come.
Yeah, when we get to discussion, that was going to be one of my things is I feel like deja vu all over again. Like I thought we were going to fix this real quick. Okay, so any other technical or clarifying questions for the staff? Before we move into public comments, I did want to point out that I distributed a memo to the Planning Commission, and there are copies in the back of the room. And for those of you who don't have a copy, I'm just going to read it. So this is a memo from me as a planning commissioner to the fellow planning commissioners dated January 11th, 2024. And I will apologize. I was trying to do this yesterday, but I spent most of the day plowing snow so I could get out my driveway. And it is regarding agenda item 2, which we're currently discussing. I would like to present the following background information in addition to the staff report. On April 27th, 2023, the Planning Commission was asked to adopt a Planning Commission resolution to amend the zoning code as a minor text amendment, changing the term cultivation to canopy. This resolution, and I've attached it, did not pass. 3 commissioners voted against the resolution, 2 voted in favor. Public comment included several speakers in support of the resolution and a letter of opposition. On May 16th, 2023, the Board of Supervisors adopted Resolution 2023-071, which waived the need for commercial cannabis variances for the 2023 calendar year for certain cannabis licenses. This resolution was intended to allow cultivation during the 2023 season and anticipated that amendments to the ordinance would be completed. On December 19th, 2023, the Board of Supervisors agenda included an agenda item to adopt a resolution to streamline approval of cannabis licenses that require a variance for 2024. This agenda item had not been presented to the Planning Commission for input. I sent an email to Supervisor Lutweiler expressing disappointment that the Planning Commission had not been asked to provide input. And I've attached my email, which I'll read. During the Board of Supervisors discussion, it was stated that the Planning Commission had not been asked to provide input on the resolution the previous year, so that's why it had not been presented to us in 2024. I disagree. The Board of Supervisors voted to send this item to the Planning Commission for discussion and comments, then extended the current resolution till the end of February 2024 to allow them time to consider it at their meetings in February. The draft resolution presented to the Board of Supervisors in December was the same as attachment 1 to our staff report. The staff report recommended that the resolution be extended through calendar year 2024 or until ordinance updates are finalized and implemented. And then attachment 2, which is the SHN suggestions, is substantially different from the previous resolution 2023-071. I just kind of wanted to provide that timeline and explain kind of why we're here tonight. I apologize to my fellow commissioners if you thought you weren't going to be meeting this month. Because I sent an email to my supervisor saying, I see that there is an agenda item for discussion at the Board of Supervisors meeting tomorrow, potentially extending the resolution for 2024, affecting the processing of variances. I am extremely disappointed that this was not brought before the Planning Commission for input. It was not even mentioned during the Planning Director's report last week, when it would have been placed on the Board of Supervisors agenda. Why not? Why not let the Planning Commission know that this was scheduled? I have been fending off comments that the Planning Commission is ignored or just a rubber stamp entity. This certainly does not help me make the case. I'm also disturbed that a rationale for requesting this extended resolution is due to staffing issues. I'm going to say lack of staff is a bad reason to implement poor planning practices. I'm requesting that this item be deferred by the Board of Supervisors and agendaed for a future Planning Commission meeting. So that's why we're here. The Board of Supervisors did decide to send it back to us and give us a chance to provide input before they consider final adoption of that resolution. So again, if you didn't want to be here tonight, I'm sorry. Because truly, I have been hearing, it's been in the journal, you know, that we're kind of like just an afterthought. And I want to make sure that we provide valued comments when it's appropriate. So that's, I think, the staff presentation and the technical clarifying questions. So we will move on to public comment. So do we have any public comment in the room?
Hi, I'm Steve Lyon from Junction City. I'm gonna talk a little fast because 3 minutes is quick. I'd love 5 minutes if you wanted to do that ever. This issue is important to me. It directly affects me. I've had a license since 2016. We do processing in our detached garage. And when Director Connell changed the definition of canopy to cultivation, suddenly I was out of compliance after however many years of no problems with my neighbors, know all my neighbors, but suddenly I'm out of compliance for nothing. I also wanted to point out that Director Connell changed that definition without a resolution, but now we need a resolution to change it back, which seems kind of unfair, like maybe it should have never been changed in the first place without a resolution, and was that change done properly? I've worked for general contractors, doing a lot of planning, doing a lot of development for many years. We in Trinity County, we treat cannabis cultivation like we're dealing with uranium mines. It's unlike any other planning or building, the way we treat it, the way we notify neighbors of variances, the way we're talking about changing variances. If I get a variance to move a sidewalk or to have a closer setback to public property or creeks or septics or property lines, there's just zero chance that's going to be changed 2, 5, 10 years down the road, and that we're going to have to move buildings and move parking lots. The first thing we do when we develop a project is we find out what our design considerations are: setbacks, creeks, rivers, CEQA, and the design is based off of those conditions. And it's just unheard of, other than cannabis, of course, to address the concerns that y'all brought up about, well, what happens in the future? Supervisor Luttweiler brought up a great example of horse farms in Kentucky, and how there was long established horse farms, and then somebody developed a neighborhood next to it, and suddenly the neighbors were like, they bought houses that backed up to horse barns, and suddenly they're like, well, hey, I don't like the smell of horses. Well, you bought a property next to a horse barn, and there is a long established principle of first come, first serve. We do this in water law. We do this and everything else. If I have a well on my property and my neighbor decides to move in and put a septic too close to my well, I'm sorry, but he should have done his due diligence and known where my well was. Or vice versa. If I have a septic and he wants to put in a well, there's a setback requirement that he has to keep away from my existing infrastructure. There has to be some kind of consideration for first come, first serve, or how can we ever develop? I planned my property carefully. I planned my garden, my outbuildings carefully. I did my CEQA. I did all my Appendix Cs. I went through years, spent thousands of dollars on infrastructure, water, buildings, planning. I have a notice of determination, the gold standard of CEQA, because of the way I designed my property. And now, how do I change that? I think it's unreasonable and unfair, and I hope that we support the staff recommendations. I think the buffer zone ideas is a great way to go about it. Variance is not the appropriate vehicle. Thank you very much. It's my daughter's birthday, so I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna catch the rest of this tomorrow on YouTube. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your comments. Other public comment in the room?
Thank you, Chair. Adrian Keys from Hayfork. Yeah, from reading through the staff report, really what I think was some of the most important pieces in there are the historic data and the idea that the program was developed with the setbacks being from canopy, and permits were issued under that, local cultivation permits, building permits, all of that. And then administratively by Sean Connell, who's clearly no longer here, and for good reason. One day he woke up and changed that. And this is what happened. As far as I'm aware, there hasn't been like this historic litany of complaints about neighbors based on the potential nuisance regarding their setbacks in a variance situation. So whether the setback from canopy or the setback from the structures, it seems that the setback from canopy has been working really just fine for this entire time. It hasn't been a controversial issue. This isn't being brought to you by constituents complaining about how the system works. This has been brought to you incidentally through really the poor judgment of an ex-employee. I'll tell you, if I was new at a job and I stumbled upon something as meaningful in my work as changing the definition that setbacks related to in the ordinance, I probably would have gone to my superiors and asked for this historic information and asked for what the function and form of this is. Instead, you just changed it. It was pretty bad. And I would say one way to allow staff to have the time to work on finishing this and not patching it. Obviously, we're going to need one more round of patching, but the best case scenario is getting through the ordinance updates and getting through ideally to the administrative buffer reduction. One way to provide the staff with that time is to continue with the resolution. Takes however many, 54, maybe more, maybe less. I don't know. 54 is noted in the staff report, I believe. If there are 54 variances they didn't have to do and all the time and effort that it takes to do those, maybe we could land at a viable resolution a little bit quicker instead of the end of this year, the end of next year, or some given point in the future, maybe allowing staff to continue to refine this process in a constructive way with public input, with public process involved. We wouldn't have to be having special meetings like this. I would like the commission to include in their recommendations to the supervisors to return to the prior definition, to just return it to canopy. I know you guys voted it down last time, but here we are again. I'm not seeing a 3-2 in this room tonight. So it's kind of interesting. So let's see where we go with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment in the room?
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Lisa Wright from Lewiston. I'd like to challenge you to take a paradigm shift. Why do we need cannabis cultivation variances anymore? Okay, back in 2016, in order to get an ordinance put forward, there were certain concessions made. A variance by definition by California state law is a setback from your property line, not from an activity to another residence. So variance, throw it out the window right there, right? Get out of this box. And we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on an FEIR that fully addresses the issues at hand with the proximity of dwellings to commercial cultivation activities. CEQA documents, tens of thousands of dollars, biological assessments, cultural, et cetera, includes the analysis that would impact the neighbors. Get outside that box, right? CCVs are really no longer needed because we have an FEIR. We have a process where CEQA review is done. Neighbors are noticed. There's an opportunity if you have factual data to contradict or refute the findings of the CEQA document, you can present that in an appeal. There's no reason to even have CCVs anymore. So if the intermediate step is to do this resolution, I think if we got rid of all that, we wouldn't have all of this. So it's about your time as well. You should be focused on land use. This isn't about land use anymore. We're into the weeds of something that doesn't have anything to do with that. If there's a CEQA challenge, then fair enough. Let's challenge it. But we do noise, light, odor plans, attenuation plans, all of that is built in. It costs the farmers literally tens of thousands of dollars. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on an EIR. There is absolutely no reason. You basically are wasting your time, much less, staff. It's not as much even about staff, but they have to do basically what the commission and so on has decided. So think outside the box. Let's get out of that, get it into a paradigm shift. Think about what's practical, what's realistic, and what makes the most sense for businesses to be successful. So that's my 2 cents for the day. If the resolution amendments that have been presented by staff get us to that discussion with ordinance amendments, then please wholeheartedly support it and let's get past taking all this time just on things that are already being addressed separately. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have comments on Zoom? Jeff?
Hi, Jeff Goodell of Xenia. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just like to reiterate what the three previous speakers have said. They've said it better than I can. I'd like to see you guys go with staff recommendations as well as changing the interpretation of where this setback is measured from back to the canopy. I think changing it from, a new employee who wasn't here when the rules were developed, and then going with his new interpretation, creating an even, I mean, if you were trying to derail the program even more during your tenure, I mean, that's what I would have done. Exactly what Sean Connell did. It created the need for more variances. People just can't move buildings that were already approved. So just make things easier on everybody, especially when there's no neighbor problems. Let's just move the measurement back. That's the way our EIR and our CEQA was done, based on measuring from canopy. And that's an important fact. And that's why it shouldn't have been changed in the first place. So please go staff recommendations, and let's move on past this. And hopefully the supervisors with the new ordinance can fix a lot of these problems with the new ordinance and not create new ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comment on Zoom? Carla?
Hello, this is Carla Avila from High and Palm. I am the executive director of Trinity County Agricultural Alliance. We represent hundreds of farmers, more than 80 of which who have had a full annual permit at both the county and state level for quite some time. I'm going to speak for myself right now as a small business owner in District 4 with a 5,000 square foot cannabis cultivation permit with a variance from my neighbor since 2016. I want to say that, the reason this is before you right now is because somebody made a decision that resulted in a change of definition that really does not do anything to benefit the actual addressing of any potential nuisance impacts. What we're looking at here, everything that could possibly come up has been identified or will have to be addressed with FEIR, site-specific mitigation measures. Every site has its specific criteria. If we don't address ourselves to performance standards, we already have to adhere to that. This program of variances, we did the best we could before 2018 to come up with a law, just like Humboldt and Mendo and Nevada counties, for something that actually precluded Prop 64 in 2018. So we're actually looking at, in Trinity County, we did something right initially. We looked at how we could protect our neighbors and make sure that impacts were addressed. And now, in hindsight, we're looking at something that all of a sudden, a definition change. Well, now we're talking about somebody's water tank. Well, okay, so your neighbor has a water tank and it is forbearing from using water. And now, who else with a water tank within 350 feet of a dwelling? How many water tanks are within 350 feet of a dwelling? Is this really a can of worms we want to open up? Because I don't think it is. I think this was something that your staff today is bringing before you because that's the appropriate protocol. And bottom line is, we have parameters to protect neighbors, and that is always what this has been about, and that is not going away. what we're trying to do here is make sure we stay aligned to protocol that are fair. And I really appreciate what everyone on the commission has brought up. So I hope you'll support your staff. This is a very well researched way to go about moving forward with this solution. Thank you.
TSG.
Hi, this is Nicholas Holiday out in Burnt Ranch. I am not directly affected by these variances, so to speak, because I do fit the boundaries of the small license setback. But in the same vein, I also have a medium license that has the setback of 500 feet from the property line. Now, this is something that isn't brought before you today, but I feel like the Planning Commission should hear this and kind of be prepped for this with zoning and land use. It just seems like so much of a hassle for every staff member there to have to go through this every time we need to have new licenses renewed. And, you know, ironically, my medium license is 1,400 feet from a nearest dwelling, but 275 feet from the property line. And in between that 1,400 feet and the neighbor's dwelling is my small license, which fits the 350 feet setback from a dwelling. I would like to see that the large or medium licenses be wrapped into this 300-foot setback. I realize that, or I assume that Sean Connell entered in this new definition of cultivation really to slow down every single thing with this program. You guys are busy enough. You don't need all of this. We don't need to have letters sent to every single neighbor every single year, including neighbors that are cultivating. I receive a letter to myself from both sites from the county, which just seems like a complete waste of time. Even further, I would say that ag zone properties shouldn't even have to reach those setbacks. It just doesn't make sense to me, as Stephen Lyon pointed out earlier. You don't move next to a horse farm and complain about the manure. It's just not what you do. These projects have been very costly, and I have about $600,000 worth of permitted buildings in the one corner that are close enough to require my variance setback. It would be very costly for me and to every other cultivator to move what they need to stay compliant with everyone. Thank you guys very much for listening.
Matt Jefferson.
Matt Jefferson, Coffee Creek. I just reiterate everything the previous speakers have said. They've pretty much said everything. But we're in support of staff recommendations with the addition of changing the setbacks back to mature canopy. It's like that same old thing, just stop moving the goalposts. Let the farmers farm. Thank you.
Daryl Davis.
Hi there, this is Daryl. Also, I'd like to reiterate as a farmer that I appreciate what everybody else has been saying. I'm on board with that. I do want to talk about the elephant in the room here, though. It seems like no one's really given this part any consideration. The reason why a farmer would have to get a variance in the first place is because that's the last resort. That was all discussed at the time that they were getting a variance. Parcels are brought up. Everybody looks at the parcels. Oh yeah, there's nowhere else left on the parcel. We need a variance. So from this moment, please don't pretend like there's an alternative that's just quick, easy, oh, let's move that building. That's not even an option here. What we're talking about variances. So, well, I don't know really why we're even having this discussion in the first place. We're not going to listen to Sean anymore. He's long gone. This is the reason why he's gone. And we're still going through it. So please, if you have a reason why you can't support what staff recommends, you can't support the EIR, then you can't support our CEQA, you can't support the farmers then. And if you're going to do that, if you have that kind of a vote here, you have to supply a very legal foundation for that. Why would you oppose any of that with a vote? Because that's what you're up against. Today's vote could literally end a farm entirely. You could put someone completely out of business. You could put somebody out of business for years. You know, that's what you're under consideration here. Thank you.
Do you have additional comments on Zoom? Rhoda?
Hi, this is Rhoda Kane from Trinity Center, Coffee Creek. I'm also going to agree with previous commenters. I feel like the main reason we're here today, the main reason this has to come back before the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission over and over again is because of an arbitrary definition change that never should have happened by a very short-lived employee that isn't here anymore. I think it would be unwise to continue to bog the county down longer and longer and longer by grasping onto this arbitrary change made by an employee that was very short-lived and isn't here anymore. And I think extending this and letting it go for another year is extreme. It's necessary because, you know, it's not the cultivator's fault, and that we haven't got through the ordinance updates yet, but we need to not throw people into homelessness because the county has not finished the ordinance updates. And I think we need to support staff's recommendations, and we just got to get through this in a way that's fair to everybody. And it's just not fair to keep kicking the cultivators down the road every time there's a tiny little, you know, we can't just keep grasping at ways to kick the cultivators down the road. These people worked hard. They were already approved, many of them. And I just want it to be fair. And I just hope that we can make a decision that's the right thing to do and it's fair for everybody. And thank you.
Thank you. Patrick Kahn?
Hi, this is Patrick Kahn from Sawyer. I have a type 3 license with a variance downriver. And I just wanted to, voice my support for all the farmers who have spoke before me and everyone there who seems to want to create a solution that can get us down the road and unlock this log jam that kind of was created in an atmosphere of, some of these setbacks in and of themselves are pretty large and hard on everyone, and especially on staff, which changes. And some of those people that have changed just didn't leave us in a good position. So I really support everyone and a lot of their comments that support us getting down the road and getting out of this logjam that has been created. And so anything that we can do to support staff and get the definitions the way it supports our community, I'm in favor. And I just want to thank everyone for their eloquent speaking earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comment on Zoom?
They're not popping up yet. They're not popping up, so I think we're done.
So as a result of the public comment, I have an additional technical question, which is one of the public commenters asked about including medium and large licenses. So the SHN proposed language doesn't mention medium and large licenses. But the original resolution isn't, let me start over. The original resolution didn't specify the size of the license. The SHN language is limited to specialty small cottage licenses. So is the SHN language eliminating medium and large licenses from this option?
Just to clarify, we don't have any large license types authorized
Okay.
under chapter 1743. The main distinction between what I would call small licenses, which are small specialty cottage and specialty license types, is that they specifically have the setback requirement for 350 feet from an adjacent
And medium, it's
building. Medium is
500.
different in the sense that it's actually a setback requirement from the property line.
The 500 feet.
Yep, from
Yeah.
the property line versus the smalls, which are required to meet the 350 from an adjacent residence.
So a medium license, if it's 500 feet from the property line, is going to meet the 350 feet from a residential structure. Just
I would agree.
mathematically. Okay. All right. Because I didn't want to exclude medium licenses if that was relevant, but it doesn't seem relevant.
Yeah, they're sort of slightly in a different boat, if you will.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So do we have any other public comment on Zoom? Okay. All right.
TSG, do you have a different member of your household requesting to speak?
No, I was looking to clarify what was just your question there.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think we resolved that. Okay. So what we want to do now is bring it back to the commission. Sorry, we will want to close public comment and bring it back to the commission for discussion. We don't really have a motion. What we want to do is provide any consensus or comments, concerns to the Board of Supervisors. So maybe what I will do is ask for your comments or thoughts on some of the notes that I have. Does that sound okay? And we'll see how it goes. So as I said earlier, I feel like this is deja vu all over again a little bit. Last year when we discussed this, we asked the staff to prioritize kind of fixing this ordinance. And so I'm wondering if we want to repeat that to ask that maybe the Board of Supervisors give direction to staff to fix this one portion of the ordinance in a timely manner while they're proceeding with the larger kind of amendments to the ordinance. What do you guys think?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
So the goal of this meeting is to make it so we can figure these things out and smooth it out by either extending through 24, this, correct? And so that we can correct those things. My question within that is not only do we need to do that, we need to come up with something that simplifies the whole thing about variances. I agree, it'd be nice to have fewer variances. It's a pain in the butt. Wouldn't it be also better to have variances that require an annual renewal to only occur if there's a complaint?
Well, I think one fix of the ordinance is to, and we talked about this last year, is to stop calling them variances because variances are defined by the state. And they're, a unique situation due to the size, topography, that's specified in state law. So I think that's why staff is proposing to call it something different, the residential setback or a buffer or whatever you want to call it, a different term. So we're not stuck in that variance box.
That's great, but right now it's still called a CCV. So how else do we discuss that specific thing?
One way would be to fix the definition of cultivation. I mean, I would have to strongly disagree with the speakers because, and we talked about this last year. I mean, in the ordinance, it specifically says cultivation means the planting, growing, harvesting, drying, or processing of cannabis plants or any part thereof. So the normal person reading that is going to think, well, okay, cultivation includes your storage facility, your processing facility. That's the way the ordinance was originally written. And so then new staff came in and read the definition and said, well, wait, then it's not just canopy, it's also drying, processing, storing. And so our conclusion last year was kind of, well, so if we're going to make that change to canopy, it's not just minor text, it's something that needs more public input in terms of ordinance development. And so anyway, so we recommended that they fix that definition. And I think if they just said, cultivation is the same as canopy, we wouldn't be in this box because then you wouldn't need a variance.
Chair, if I may.
Yeah, please.
So I think we're grappling with a few different, somewhat interwoven concepts and topics here. In terms of your recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, to simplify the language in the request, I would propose that you suggest to the board that they direct staff to make updates to 1743-050, which contains the requirement, and I can read that code section if it's helpful. Shall I do that?
Please.
So 1743-050A8 says, for specialty cottage, specialty, and small licenses, cultivation shall not be allowed within 350 feet of a residential structure on any adjoining parcels. For medium licenses, cultivation shall not be allowed within 500 feet of an adjacent property line. Applications for a variance from this provision will be considered by the Trinity County Planning Commission. After obtaining an initial variance, the planning director can issue a director's use permit for subsequent years after an inspection. So in updates to 1743-050 specific to this variance requirement and also to the terms cultivation versus canopy as it relates to the points which are measured or captured in that mapping for that setback requirement, we can do one or two of a few options, but basically there could be the change to say that canopy shall not be allowed within 350 feet. Or we could update the definitions. I think my suggestion would be that, and then, so there's that issue. And then the other component I think that we're discussing is this requirement to obtain an initial variance as a result of not meeting the setback requirement. So in updates to 1743-050, we could both address where that setback requirement or what elements that setback requirement would be measured from, as well as addressing the use of the term variance and proposing that we convert that to the administrative buffer reduction concept that was proposed in the first draft of the ordinance updates. And so practically, I've looked a little bit at the potential timelines to, have this next board meeting with your suggestions and comments for them. And then if we were to go in the direction of updates to 050, then bringing that back to you all could be achieved in early February. So I might suggest that since the current resolution has been extended through February, the language, rather than diving into all of the proposed changes from SHN related to the ordinance, that we could extend the ordinance or modify the language very simply, just to say extend through March or until ordinance updates are achieved. But I believe that we would be able to meet the required noticing timelines to then schedule the updates, which I actually brought to Cannabis Ordinance Ad Hoc today for discussion, 2050, related to this. But I felt that the discussion of those changes was outside of the scope of the direction and the request from the Board of Supervisors, which was specific to how to improve the resolution. So in terms of their specific request to improve the resolution, we can dive into the SHN comments, but to many of your comments, Chair Fall, that gets us into a bit of ambiguity since we haven't clarified exactly how the process would be changed and converted to the DUP process. So my hope was that we would bring the proposed changes back for you all as a minor amendment to zoning code, which would include the potential of converting to an administrative buffer reduction director's use permit. And then we could really dig into all of that at that time. So if that helps to sort of guide, one potential option or subset of the options in terms of your recommendation.
So you're right. What we're looking at today is, providing feedback to the Board of Supervisors on the resolution. The way I look at it is the resolution, the recommendation was to extend it through the calendar year 2024 or until ordinance updates are finalized and implemented. I personally think the Planning Commission can weigh in on those options by saying, we want to prioritize, those fixes to the amendment, to the ordinance that would resolve this issue prior to the larger, rewrite of the cannabis ordinance. Because my concern is if you say it's through the end of 2024 or until the ordinance updates are finalized and implemented, we don't know when that would be. That could be 3 or 4 years from now. So, that's pretty vague.
Sure.
So I would like to be more specific and prioritizing, if that's the word, and suggesting to the Board of Supervisors that, we think last year, like I said, we talked about this a year ago in April. We want to get this little thing fixed. It just seemed like a smaller thing. So we don't have to be back next year. And here we are. So what do you guys think?
I think I'm certainly in favor of removing the logjam. I've been a commissioner now, I believe, for coming up on my 4th year. I don't remember hearing at the April meeting last year that a member of staff had arbitrarily changed the definition of a term that has been in use and as part of what the ordinance was written for, to change that wording to put all these people now in a very precarious situation, I think is a huge problem. Historically, it seems to be, from what we've heard, the program is working. There's not a huge amount of complaints. Everyone here is everyone that's spoken is very in favor of it. They all spoke very well, articulate, to the point. I thought all their points were correct. I think anything we can do to remove the logjam, to assist staff with their huge backlog of work without adding to it, I'm all in favor of.
I can agree with everything that Commissioner Barrett has spoken. And like I was sharing, or my personal opinion on a lot of the matter is like not, is like if a person just like who was it, Mr. Steve Line, I believe, or somebody else, it was like if I think they brought up the analogy of like you move in next to a horse farm, and then you want to try to get the long-standing horse farmer to have to make a bunch of changes and stuff because of you decided to purchase that piece of property. It's like that's not quite very just, in my opinion.
So as far as consensus goes, I mean, obviously the consensus is we need to deal with this and resolve this and help these people. Okay, so that's one thing. The thing though is, how do we do that? What recommendations does the Planning Commission want to make to the Board of Supervisors on how to go about doing that?
Okay, one of the thoughts that I have, and it's like everybody has spoken it tonight, is like, let's go back to the terminology of what was intended when it said canopy, or where it was intended when cultivation was intended as canopy.
That means changing the ordinance, which is what we asked them to do, because the ordinance as written, I read it to you. I mean, the ordinance as written defines cultivation to include planting, growing, harvesting, drying, or processing of cannabis plants. So that's the whole crux of the matter. That's the current language in the ordinance. And so we have to, and that's the way it's been. And we got letters last year from people pointing out that that's the way it has been from day one. That's the language that was in the original ordinance. We did get that is the language that's in the ordinance.
Not the original definition of 26.
The canopy, so I disagree. I dug out the original ordinance, the original resolution 385, whatever that was in 2017. And that's what the language was. So that was what we're dealing with, is that's what the ordinance says. And so that's causing the problem. So we need to fix that. I agree, we need to fix that. So I'm back to my question, which is how do we make suggestions to the Board of Supervisors on how to fix that? I mean, last year we said we need to fix that part of the ordinance, so we're not coming back. Do we want to say that again? But is that a priority, or do we want to have this fix lumped in with the larger overall of the cannabis ordinance, which is where it is right now?
But both of these are contained in the same section, rather than getting into changing the definitions themselves, you could certainly propose to the board to change the word cultivation to canopy as it relates to the setback requirement. And then you could also propose to the board to modify or, change the current CCV process to an administrative buffer reduction process as a DUP. And as it relates to their specific request of how to improve the resolution, I think you're welcome to go outside of their specific request in terms of whatever recommendations you see fit. And so if part of, what you think is most appropriate would be, my suggestion would be to ask them to prioritize or direct staff to prioritize updates to 17-43050 to address the term the use of the term cultivation and replace it with canopy, if that's your desire. And then to also, again, if you desire to propose converting CCV to an administrative buffer reduction director's use permit.
That sounds beautiful to
I
me.
couldn't have said it better.
And
I,
then-
I agree. So I think, Commissioner Ellis, what do you think?
Still thinking. Give me a moment.
While Commissioner Ellis is thinking, I want to add one more thing in terms of, right, as far as the timeline and ensuring that, your comments and suggestions to the board capture the practical timeline associated with, that this resolution has been extended through February. We could have these proposed changes that, if that's your request and if that's the board's direction to staff, to modify cultivation to canopy and, include the administrative buffer reduction concept. We could have that back to you in early February. But likely what that means is that it wouldn't make it back to the board until very late February or early March. And then for ordinance changes, it takes 30 days for it to go into effect. So again, my suggestion might be, simply just to extend the resolution as currently constructed with obviously the appropriate changes to the reference of 2023 to 2024 and just extend it through March. And, hopefully if everyone is in agreement, planning commission and board that this is the appropriate, these are the appropriate changes to make, then we could have this all behind us by the end of March.
I think that sounds great.
Does that mean we'll never hear about a variance again?
No.
Oh.
Okay.
I was hoping.
So I think you're getting consensus that, yes, we want to direct staff to prioritize amendments to 17.43.050A8 to replace cultivation with canopy and to include the administrative buffer concept and to extend the time period for the current resolution through the end of March. Yeah, I have a couple other things though.
I mean, and just to, prevent any confusion from my lack of appropriate timekeeping, it could say, or until updates to 17.43050 are completed, if you want to, capture that in a less capture that more clearly in terms of your comments of, well, or until completed, that could be.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a way to say that, I mean, we don't want to get diverted onto larger issues. We want to focus and prioritize on those specific fixes that need to be done. Is that a way to say that?
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Okay, so I think we got consensus on that one. Yes?
I have a couple more
Yeah,
questions.
please.
So cultivation to canopy, now we're talking about adjusting something. That's not something that would be taken care of in what we're trying to do today. It would be more correct. What we're talking about is extending this coverage for anybody that is affected that has a license right now until March or such a time as this is repaired. How will changing from cultivation to canopy, if that's going back to what it was, how is it going to affect any decisions that were made in the past 6 months, 8 months, year that were previously made? Maybe there's denials that happened because of that. How does that affect that?
And I believe Margaret is online and she's probably the appropriate person to answer that question for you all.
I'm here. Good evening. Would you mind repeating the question just to make sure I can hear it perfectly?
Hi, Margaret. This is Don Ellis. The question is, if we decide to go from cultivation to canopy, that changes the definition of a setback. Even if it's 350 feet, it changes the location. So how does that affect decisions that were made in the past based on how we understand it today?
It would make a significant difference, and we would have to go back and figure out how to handle that in terms of what's already been done. Typically, I mean, again, and that would be the decision of the board, how they want to handle it, though, although I anticipate there would have to be some element of what I like to, what's colloquially called grandfathering, but I heard that's not the appropriate expression, but some level of reconciliation between old and the new rules as we're doing a transition. But that would be something that the board would ultimately have to decide.
Thank you.
And I just want to make clear, Drew, Director Perlablani, that we're talking about changing the ordinance so public comment would be allowed. People that wanted to keep the original language of cultivation, including processing and storage and all that, they would be able to make those comments to us and to the Board of Supervisors as part of the ordinance language development, correct? Okay, because I just want to make sure, I've had people tell me this is the way they think the ordinance was originally written, and they feel like the resolution kind of bypasses that. And so I'm just trying to make sure that those people have the ability to weigh in on any changes to the ordinance. Okay, that's great. So I have a question for my fellow commissioners. So, the supervisors, if they can choose to prioritize, these amendments or not, or they could just go ahead and adopt the resolution. Do we want to say anything about the options between the director's use permit route versus the consent opposition form? Do we have a preference there? Commissioner Barrett.
As far as, could you expand a little bit on what you think?
Well, the supervisors would be presented with two options. Are they going to be presented with attachment 1 or attachment 2, or just attachment 1?
I will be bringing everything that's in backup tonight to them. So I didn't see it as option 1, option 2 per se. It was just, in the discussion with SHN, they provided this feedback, which I thought might be beneficial for our discussion. And so for that reason, it was provided to you this evening, but it really wasn't intended to be, hey, this is option 1, this is option 2.
Because there's a lot of strike through and additions, and I think most of the strike through and additions are saying the same thing. But the major difference I noticed was that the SHN recommendation deleted the consent opposition form, and it kind of reverted to the current appeals process, but it doesn't mention director's use permit. So I was trying to figure out if the planning commission wanted to, if our recommendation would be to stick with the current consent opposition letter, or if we wanted to go with the current appeals process with the caveat that it essentially be a director's use permit.
Which one, if I may?
Yeah.
Which one is less burdensome to county staff?
I think from the standpoint of simplicity, it would be my recommendation that we make some very minor modifications to the existing resolution in terms of, changing 2023 to 2024 and the timeline, extending it, another month or 2 at the most. rather than getting into all of the nuance that I think is important that they've clarified for us. But I think really the result of that, as you stated, Chair Fall, is that your preference is to make updates to 1743-050 to permanently resolve much of this situation.
Well, I mean, I'm okay with sticking with the consent opposition letter. I'm always concerned about the 10 days, just because if you're on vacation, you're screwed. But the current language, I'm not sure if there's like a better, more legal rationale for requiring director's use permits versus the consent opposition letter. I'm okay with it the way that it is. And that's what I'm asking the commissioners.
Would there be a problem with us extending it to 15 days? Because I've had many complaints as well, saying that it was like people have said 10 days is like they mail it out and it's like 10 days by the time we got it. It was like, what's that? Well, I've had some complaints on that, and it was like, would it?
15 days ahead of time.
Okay, but I was just saying, and it's like, and I'm not trying to throw you under the bus. I'm not. But I was gonna say, would 5 extra days hurt? Could we do something of that nature and make it 15 days instead of 10?
Related to that specific question, in the ad hoc meeting today, we went through a list of priorities or topics to present to the board, and they're going to be on this upcoming agenda. They'll be presented to the board for the board as a whole to weigh in on prioritization of various topics that are related to the cannabis ordinance updates as a whole. That was a specific topic which I believe will be on the list for discussion and for the board to weigh in on prioritization of that. It's basically what was proposed in ad hoc was to extend it from 10 to 15 days. So I don't think it's entirely appropriate to basically minor revisions to 1743-050 could potentially capture that. One of the issues is that it then is distinct from the rest of the neighbor noticing standard for any other neighbor noticing, which is 10 days. And so without further analysis, I don't know that I can give you a strong recommendation about whether that's appropriate to include specific to CCVs or, not meeting these setback requirements, but certainly something that I think is going to be discussed by the board and undoubtedly something that will be entertained as a future ordinance amendment.
So
Go ahead.
The consent opposition letter was a new letter that was drafted as a part of the resolution last year. So it seems like it's kind of a free form thing. Like it would be easy to just, it's not like a formal DUP process. It's something new that you came up with in order to implement this resolution. So is it possible then to just, internally kind of say, yeah, we got this new form and we're going to do it, make sure people have 15 days to comment?
Like if Director Plaboni was saying that it's like that's something that the board is going to be addressing, maybe we shouldn't just worry about it just yet, because it should be, I believe it will be coming back to us again, will it not? And then at that point, we could address it again if we see something that they only.
Right, or we could request it now, that they consider it.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly if that's what y'all desire, to include that in your recommendation related to this agenda item this evening. Yep.
Commissioner Barrett?
I'm certainly agreeable with extending it out, but I do agree with Director Plaboni's statement that 10 days kind of is the standard. So to make an exception just for this is strange, but I'm certainly not opposed to asking about it.
Commissioner Ellis?
Exactly the same. I think it should stay as close to everything else as possible. It just makes it confusing and special, and I don't know if that's really a necessary step.
Okay, so am I hearing that the consensus is we're okay with the consent opposition letter at 10 days?
Correct.
Okay, rather than the proposal for the director's use permit.
Well, related to the consent opposition letter, in discussion with county council and with SHN, there were some significant concerns about the use of that opposition letter. I hesitate to kind of weigh in on the legality or, you know, any concerns from county council related to that. I don't know if Margaret wants to address it specifically for you all, or we want to just sort of move on, but there were some significant concerns raised about the use of opposition as it relates to CCVs in their current form, but related to extending the resolution and the current language. Again, I would propose going the route of simplicity and
Right.
not trying to make too many changes.
No, I'm just trying to cover the bases where if the Board of Supervisors decides that they have a concern about the consent opposition letter and they decide to go the standard appeals process, I'm back to my original question, which is, should we mention the director's use permit? Because that's not in the language that SHN is proposing.
Right. And so what I have written down was to change cultivation to canopy and then to propose the CCV to administrative buffer reduction DUP. That's what I proposed earlier, that it seemed as though you all were in agreement with. I
Okay, but
agree that it's not
but-
addressed in the resolution. And so I would push SHN suggested comments off the table and keep our current resolution with the inclusion of, you know, extending it through March or mid-April or whatever seems appropriate from a timeline perspective.
I guess I'm like twice bitten here because the Board of Supervisors doesn't always, they kind of do the opposite of what we say a lot. So if we say we want to have this as a priority, I don't know if that's going to work. So I'm looking at Plan B. So Plan B, my question is, if they're looking at the current resolution and there are legal questions regarding the consent opposition letter, and then they decide to use the appeals process, does the Planning Commission want to say that that should be through the director's use permit?
I think that, you know, based on the discussions I've had, that is the recommendation from both county councils, you know, land use planning attorney and SHN, is that it would be more consistent with the accepted practices to move this to a director's use permit, which, as I described, would then, there would be a neighbor notification that went out to say a director's use permit, an application for a director's use permit has been received. And then at the time, and also clarify, and I apologize, I can actually read some of the comments from SHN related to the DUP process, if that kind of helps
Okay.
frame your thinking. So related to the buffer reductions like a DUP, it is recommended that a notice of application be provided to affected property owners providing information about the applications and identify the following. 1, the date and time that the planning director will take action on the application, and 2, the date and time when comments must be submitted to the county to be considered by the planning director prior to taking action. So that there would be a two-part notification. Application for the DUP has been received, and then an additional notification that would go to neighbors and to the newspaper stating that the director's use permit had been approved or will be approved on X date, which then affords anyone to appeal that director's decision.
I believe if that's the intent, then I'm certainly agreeable with it.
Okay. Okay, I think we're good on that. I just wanted, so I don't know where this actually fits in, but the staff report talks about part of the reason for doing this, and you know, the same thing, the SHN option B talks about essentially part of the reason we need to do this is because of staffing issues. And I just wanted to let you know that, you know, I've gotten some pushback from that. I've had people call me today, just stop me at the grocery store and tell me it's not fair that essentially this process is being streamlined for the cannabis industry and not for other people, lot line adjustments, you know, subdivisions, all that kind of regular planning things, which have suffered due to lack of staff. I mean, we've had engineering companies, you know, come up here and talk about, you know, all the money they've lost and projects they've being delayed and all that kind of stuff, and it's due to lack of staff. So I would just, I don't know how the rest of the planning commission feels, but I would just maybe kind of not say that that's a reason that you need to pursue this resolution, because it really does look like the cannabis industry is getting, it's not balanced, it's not fair. So anyway, well, that's what people are telling me. I'm just saying. So anyway, I don't know, my other fellow commissioners may not want to weigh in on that, but I'm just letting you guys know that's what I'm hearing.
I'll weigh in. I think that it has to be addressed somewhere, and if it starts here, then that's good. Everything that we streamline improves the process for every other aspect of the entire community. So, I think it's okay. I'd like property line adjustments to go faster too.
Right. Okay.
My thought kind of along this whole thing is like, we live in a society, I have 4 children. I have 4 children. I constantly make decisions where somebody's not happy in my household. Maybe other people, households are different than mine, but that's how it is in my household. And it's like, truth of the matter is, we're not going to make everybody happy. But it was like, but I know that the people who spoke out and reached out to me are like, this is something that needs to be dealt with. And it was like, you know what? Well, we'll make our decision. But we'll make our decision, and then it's like, rest on the supervisors.
Okay, so any other commissioner recommendations, comments to the Board of Supervisors on their draft resolution? I do want to express our thanks to the Board of Supervisors that they did bring this back to us and allow us to chew it over and make recommendations. We appreciate that.
Very much so. Appreciate all staff's hard work. Thank you.
Okay, so that then closes. Hang on, I'm gonna find my agenda. It sounds like it's. Oh, yeah. Okay, I apologize for the For sound, we'll go ahead and proceed. We'll close item 2, discussion and study session on Board of Supervisors Resolution 2023-071, and move on to Planning Commissioner reports. Do we have any Planning Commissioner reports?
And Commissioner report.
Mr. Heaton?
Yes, two things that I want to speak on. One is that I got to bring my daughter to Weaverville today, and I spoke not a couple weeks ago or one of the last meetings or whatever when I had a friend. I gave him a little tour. I didn't realize what a jewel Weaverville was. I got to go to the Josh House today. I think that's what it's called, the Chinese temple. I was flabbergasted. I had no idea. I always thought that the Josh House was the visitor center out front, and it's like, and here I am, a Trinity County resident all my life, and had no idea. And then it was like, and then the buck hunting up there in the cemetery is absolutely amazing. The 4 bucks that we saw out there, it's like, I don't know how you get a license for a tag for that zone right there, but that's amazing. But I want to tell you, it's like, I'm impressed with the more that I'm reaching out, and when I get here a little early and reach out and check out the town, drive around here and drive around there, driving down different streets, it's like, I got to hand it to it. I'm pretty proud of Weaverville. And that's the first thing I wanted to say is like, so Weaverville can be pretty proud of a lot of the things they have there. But the other thing I want to address and say is Jeff Dickey is going to be retiring in September, into September. He's going to be done. And I'll tell you something, it's like the county is losing, honestly, from Trinity, from Southern District 5's perspective, we're losing the best thing that Weaverville has. That's just being 100% honest. The people in District 5 absolutely love him. And he goes by people's houses and checks on them, and it was like drops fish off in people's freezers, different friends that he knows and stuff like that. And like he calls me up and says, "Hey Todd, what's happening with so and so?" It's like, why? Because he loves the people and he loves our portion of the county. And I tell you something, it's like if we need, well, the person that replaces him needs to have the same attitude and the same care and the same spirit as Jeff does. Otherwise, it's going to be terrible from the perspective of District 5. Because I'll tell you what, is like if we can get somebody to follow Jeff around for a while and see how he does things and stuff like that, so he can get a feel of District 5. I tell you what, there'd be money well spent by the county right there. They could do that, because I tell you what, I know a lot of people that are absolutely highly concerned, I should say, about with Jeff being retired and who they replace him with. And so I hope that the county will take some, really assess the situation and look at it from District 5's perspective anyhow. And it was like, really be wise with whom they consider, because it could make and break a serious relationship with District 5 on our end. Thank you. And I want to also say, it's like Rory mentioned, it's like, I appreciate y'all staff for everything. It's like, and I didn't mean to throw you under the bus. It's like, but I appreciate y'all.
No question, Debbie.
Okay, other Planning Commissioner reports?
I don't know if it's a report, but I noticed we have some changes on our commission here this week, some sudden changes. Are we due for a chair swap? How does that work?
It's on the agenda for the first week in February. I think the thought process is normally new supervisors would take office in the first week in January. That would give them the opportunity to appoint their planning commissioner, and then that planning commissioner would be part of the vote for the February board, if I understand that correctly. But I will say, I'm not going to steal a lot of Ed's thunder. I do have several questions for him under the director's report, but yeah, so Commissioner Sharp has resigned. So as part of my planning commissioner report, I just really wanted to thank Bill for his service. I mean, he was the longest serving member, I guess you and Rory, when I joined, and I appreciate learning from both of you. And I'm gonna really want to wish Bill well. And I understand why he's kind of like, yay, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. My second note is I really wanted to encourage my fellow commissioners to take the UC Davis training that Debbie emailed out. It's online. It really helps a lot in terms of understanding things like variances and lot line adjustments, police power, taking, all that kind of stuff. It's, I think 6.5 hours online for $425. You don't have to travel. You just have to listen to the professors explain a lot of stuff. So I think Debbie emailed the information out, and do we know if anybody's registered yet? No? Yeah, it was extremely helpful. So please, take the time. So any other planning commissioner reports? Okay, I'll turn it over to Ed for director's report.
Can you hear me now? All right. So, yes, so Commissioner Sharp did resign. This is not a, this is not a position for the lighthearted. There can be resistance in the community. Anybody that you go against, they can speak their mind against you, your decisions, your demeanor up there. What commissioners say and do absolutely matters, and we need to remember this. And I know the commissioners that are left, you do acknowledge this. What you do out in the community, what you say to staff, it absolutely does matter. I was completely shocked when I got the email that Commissioner Sharp had resigned. I was also told that there will be a special board meeting on the 31st, and Jill, Commissioner
Supervisor
Cox is taking the applications. It has been open, so I don't know if she's received a lot of interest in it yet, but she assured me that by the end of the month, there will be a commissioner for District 2, and that will be a special board of supervisor meeting on the 31st to appoint that person. So that's actually a big deal because, we don't want to have any positions vacant. Commissioners, please check your county email from time to time. There has been a Form 700 that has been sent out. Please fill that out, take care of that, get it back to Debbie so that she can get those on file.
So, microphone. Microphone. Fair is
It's
fair.
automatic. If you get the email from the FPPC, and you all should, because they've been given your county email addresses, you fill out that form and submit it through their email to you. And it needs to be done. It's actually a requirement of appointed staff, such as yourself, who are appointed to make decisions for the county.
When did it get sent?
It might not have come out to you yet. We've been given it at staff level, but just watch. It's due April 1st.
Sooner rather than later.
And you could probably even go to their website and take care of it as well.
And then I have, sorry.
I think I've given it to you before, so I mean, I can send them back out again.
So can you tell us what the status is of the Fire Chiefs Association to the Subdivision Review Committee?
Yes, I hadn't finished my report out.
Okay, see, I always steal your thunder. I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's okay to share the thunder too. So the training that Debbie was talking about, so when you first get on board as a planning commissioner, it's very important to go through the information just to get a good idea of what the job entails. But this kind of training that Debbie just sent out, I actually signed up for it today, so I will be in this next class. And the reason why the special board of supervisor meeting is on the 31st is so the newly appointed commissioner can actually be enrolled and be in the class as well. So it's very important that, we attend our trainings or refresher trainings. We can always reach out to, other counties and talk to other planning commissioners as well. So it's just behooved if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're not really sure about something, you're not alone. Everybody starts off from somewhere and training just builds over time, training and experience. So I did want to say something about the subdivision review committee, but I would like to talk about the architectural review committee meeting first. We had the first one in a year on Tuesday. So that was a very good meeting, and it was absent the commissioner from District 2, but we wanted to go ahead and have the meeting anyway. And so it was a productive meeting. We talked about downtown Weaverville and some of the implications for some signage that's going on, some items that are in the Caltrans right away in the streets. And so just kind of bringing it back together, and hopefully the new commissioner is going to be, straight up on board and ready to go with our architectural review committee for Weaverville. The subdivision review committee, we met absent the previous appointee. So I was going to ask, have we considered who we're going to replace Commissioner Sharp with on the subdivision review committee? Because again, that committee has not met since 2012. And it's a very important, and we do have 4 tentative maps that we would be able to get into the process and actually start reviewing and get those projects moving forward. So I don't know that we can do it tonight, but maybe at the next planning commission meeting, think about who we want to appoint. And we certainly wouldn't want it to be the new person. So it would likely be from one of you 4. It's like they're not good at attendance. But I just wanted to bring that up.
Right, yeah. So please think, if you're interested in being on the subdivision review committee, we really want to have someone who can move that along. That's great that there's 4 potential maps. That's what we need.
Yep, we're excited about it, and we're excited about rejuvenating it and getting stuff done.
And then did the Board of Supervisors resolve the issue with who was going to be appointed from the Fire Chiefs Association, the primary and alternate or whatever?
I love this. Yes, they did. And they said that you can have a primary and an alternate, and there's no issue with that whatsoever. So Greg Cavallero from CAL FIRE, and then the alternate is Todd Corbett.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay. Well, before I steal any more thunder, do you have more report?
Nope, that's the end of the report this time.
Okay, well then, so I have a question. So I think a lot of us got the petition from the Hetton Valley people who want to create an opt-out. And, that they're objecting to an application. So I'm just wondering, it's kind of a 3-part question, which is, where are we on the status of, creating the opt-out? Where are we on the application itself? And then has the board, moved any on the policy for, like holding the applications kind of in abeyance while the opt-out, if it's a completed application is being processed, how's that all working time frame wise?
So the CAO has been talking with the board, and it's not public yet, but this will be discussed at the Board of Supervisor meeting on the 16th.
Oh.
So it's not just Hetton, and it's not just East Branch, but it's also Lewiston as well. And do you want to speak to any of that?
Only just to kind of make mention to what I mentioned during the discussion about the resolution, which is that I believe as part of this next board of supervisors meeting, there will be discussion or direction from the board related to prioritization. And I believe that opt-outs are part of that, both in terms of the application, the process, the practice going forward in terms of how to establish equitable or appropriate dates between applications for opt-outs and their submission date versus applications for cultivation licenses and their submission date. So I believe those discussions are all going to be, at least some of them, the first round of some of them will be on this upcoming Board of Supervisors meeting.
The three that I mentioned will be discussed.
Okay.
So hopefully there will be some direction. I don't know which way it's going to go. What I know just in reviewing the files that I've reviewed over time is that there really is no standardized process. There is no application. It's kind of people got together and they signed a petition, and then they got a board supervisor member to champion it. And then that led to a discussion. And, you know, in my personal opinion, if I was asked, I would say, I want to get away from that. I would actually like to receive some kind of direction from the board as to, let's create this application process. Let's make sure that all parties are heard, so that we can kind of standardize this. Otherwise, it's still going to be this kind of piecemeal thing. And, you know, I think it was said earlier, you know, you can't please everybody and everything, but ignoring it is not the way to go, I guess. So and they're going to be discussing it. So it's going to be hammered out on what we're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, so for my fellow commissioners, you know, when I asked this question a couple of months ago, we were told that, you know, the opt-out procedure was that a supervisor kind of had to start shepherding it through the process to create an opt-out. The Hatton Valley folks, you know, I asked this question of Supervisor Fraser, basically, are you going to, you know, shepherd their application through? And he said he did, since he lived in the opt-out area, he thought it would be a conflict, so he couldn't take that role. So then my question is, well, if that's not the process for creating an opt-out, what is it? You know, so that's still my question. I guess you're going to work on that.
Well, they're just going to review those three on the 16th. And
Okay.
if they give us direction, then they give us direction, and we're going to create a process if that's what they tell us to do.
Because, you know, I think that we had the application from the folks, well, we had the appeal from the folks in Hatton Valley about an earlier application a couple months ago. And so at that time, we were trying to figure out, well, which is first, the chicken or the egg? You know, if someone applied for an opt-out and then someone applied for a license, you know, how do you weigh who gets the kind of the greater consideration? And we were told we couldn't deny that, that we couldn't approve the appeal, that they were able to obtain the license because the opt-out area hadn't been created yet, even though they've asked for a while ago. So anyway, I think it would be really great. I think the commission would feel much more comfortable if we had a way to kind of figure out which comes first, the chicken or the egg. So we knew what ground we were on when we were, you know, listening to people appeal or, you know, ask for an opt-out or whatever. Is that right? Yeah, okay. Okay, that's great news. We'll look forward to hearing how they decide. Okay, any other questions for Director Presley? No. Okay, well, with that then, the Planning Commission meeting is adjourned at 8:08 p.m.